get to, thank you, Lori. I'm really excited that I get to introduce Sundar Bharadwaj. And he is the Coca-Cola Company Chair of Marketing at the University of Georgia. He's had previous teaching positions at the Indian School of Business, at Emory University, at Wharton at the University of Pennsylvania, and Singapore Management University. His research interests include marketing strategy, performance and metrics, customer management, innovation, marketing, finance, interface, branding, and brand management and strategy. Sundar was awarded the 2017 Sheath Long-Term Impact Journal of Marketing Award, the 2016 Best Brand Track Paper, and the 2011 Best Paper Award. And we're so excited for him to join us as one of our fellows. And so I'm going to turn it over to you, Sundar. You can share your screen. We all think we know how to run a Zoom with you. So we're going to have 2 questions in the chat window or raise our hand if we have questions, and I'll hand it over to you.
Sounds good. Thank you very much for this opportunity. It's a pleasure to talk to ISBM folks. I've been involved on the academic side for several years. This is my first interaction on the practitioner side, so I think it's an incredible honor. Thank you again for inviting me. Das is a super hard act to follow, and so it's really sort of scary to be the person right after him, and the expectation and the bar that he sort of set there makes it super challenging. And I've known Das for about 30 years, and every single interaction I've had with him has been incredibly, inspiring. I learn a ton from him every time I talk to him. So I'm going to try and talk through what I'm going to talk through. And the title, as you might see, is changed a little bit from what's listed in the program. And that's the nature of the beast in terms of dynamism and so forth, in terms of topics and in terms of issues that we're going to address. And I'm going to particularly talk about some research that I've been involved in on winning marketing organizations. And if you look at the digital space, there's as you folks have been discussing, the consumer marketing space is moved ahead. And so there are some insights here which includes both consumer marketing and B2B. So it's a mixed sample from which the study is sort of done. But there are things that I think are still relevant to the B2B world that you might take away from this talk. Again, jump in and ask questions and stop me. I'm excited about marketing, so I tend to run fast when that happens, and so do slow me down, and I'm happy to talk through stuff. All right. So why are we doing this study? So there are 2 big studies I'm going to sort of merge together and do this talk. So the first study that sort of started about 4+ years ago, and part of it is sort of motivated by actually an industry organization reaching out to me and a colleague about challenges that their membership was facing. There's a Mobile Marketing Association. They don't call themselves mobile marketing anymore. They just call themselves MMA, which I think they're trying to relabel as the modern marketing organization. And they talked about the challenges that their membership base is facing. And so we decided to go do the study. So fundamentally, the key thing is marketing is today is different and a lot more exciting. Yeah, clearly data has been the single biggest change, but the data that marketing faces is very distinct from what really energized finance about 30 years ago. 30 years ago, finance got energized because they went from monthly data to weekly data to daily data to eventually minute by minute to microsecond data of just stock prices and movements of stock prices. Marketing, those change because of the nature of data. It's not just that we have richer data on what consumers are buying and when they buy and what they buy, but we also have constant information now, real time and incredible volume about what they think and what they feel on social media. So everybody seems to have a megaphone and they're blasting their views and opinions. And this is a lot of it is rich information that now marketers can potentially benefit from and utilize. But it's also not just sort of what people buy and what they say, which is verbal data, which is unstructured, but also pictures. People are putting still pictures, people are putting videos of experience with customers and so forth. So the richness and the nature of data, lots of it is unstructured, but in real time has completely changed what marketers can do or have to deal with in the situation. Along with it is just also the ability to sort of close loop the data, meaning that I can now track better. Attribution is much better and much more easier than they could do in the past, where you would just, they want to make a quote of I spend 50% is wasted. I wish I knew which half was useful, right? So fundamentally here, you've got data that is better to track and presumably more trackable if you really believe these social media organizations like Facebook that they can identify people for you. If you believe that, then all the tracking services have come into play. And that's made marketing very different and super exciting in today's day and world. So these challenges were creating a bunch of issues for companies. One, the sheer nature of marketing activities and marketing capabilities that have emerged have just exploded, right? So we had the traditional sort of big sales, key account management, and so forth. That's on one side of the story, and in marketing, you had the traditional brand marketers and the storytelling capabilities that existed, and your integration with sort of the agencies and advertising and so forth, which lead to media management and media mix models and marketing mix models. But beyond that, this explosion that has arrived, you've got this whole performance marketing teams within companies. You've got things that look at data privacy issues. There are brand safety issues. There are brand activism issues, data science, journey management issues. All of these have exploded into the face of marketers. That's created enormous challenges, enormous confusion that marketers had to sort of deal with. In fact, if you go look at the upside that comes with the challenges of rich data, is evolving customer expectation. Customer expectations have blown through the roof. A lot of these direct-to-consumer marketers that have emerged in the B2C space that have dramatically changed what expectation, what requirement, what needs to be met by firms for consumers. I'll talk a little bit more about what that means as well in a minute here. Omnichannel consistency becomes critically important. Customers buy where they want to buy, how they want to buy, and companies really cannot avoid that fact that customers can deal with either a single channel company or a multi-channel company where the channels don't talk to each other to have this kind of omni-channel excellence, because that's what customers sort of want. Brands increasingly purpose-driven. The younger audiences in the world are more focused on brands being to say something about social issues. So purpose is becoming increasingly important. Social impact is becoming very critical. And activist brands cannot afford to be bystanders more and more. They have to think about becoming allies or activists themselves. A bunch of new competitors who sell directly to customers, who sort of bypass. There are platforms that are emerging that becomes dramatically challenging for companies. Collaboration requirements have exploded, and I'll talk a bit more about this as well. And clearly the data avalanche, the richness of data that companies are dealing with, they're facing with is incredible, and that's changed how marketing can and possibly will be done. So talking of customer expectations, beyond your standard expectations of delivering good quality product at an affordable price and making the product available for people when they want, what three new kinds of needs have sort of emerged in a big way. One, what you're seeing on the x-axis here is basically different age groups of people. And so it goes from 20 all the way to sort of 60. On the y-axis is basically, think of a conjoint as these are marginal utilities, things that drive the purchase choice in decision making after taking care of your traditional or what we call foundational requirements of product quality, price, availability, and so forth. Is convenience across the board, across every single age group. Convenience is becoming hugely important as a critical driver of choice. The other thing, which is, we overstate, and some of you pointed out a bit ago in the conversation as well, personalization is becoming really, really important. B2B space, you've always had this ability to sort of customize product to the customer. Personalization is the other side, where companies can utilize information about consumer purchases and behaviors in the past and then deliver offerings that may fit their needs, rather than working with customers and customizing the product. Yeah, it's about personalization based on data-driven from the company side. And the third thing is the idea of meaning, which is what we talked about, the social impact of brands and products becoming very important, and brands having purpose. And it sort of varies across age groups. Convenience is consistently important across different age groups. Personalization relatively conveniently consistent across age groups, less important than convenience. And meaning sort of varies. Younger people value meaning and purpose a lot more, older people a lot less so, right? So is what you're finding. And that's very a general thing across different sectors. If you go across sectors, there's some heterogeneity, but largely the pattern remains relatively consistent in terms of convenience, personalization, and meaning coming into play. And the relative importance may vary a little bit across sectors, but these are clearly new needs that customers seem to have studied. And this is based on a sample of representative sample of US consumers. And from the firm side, this has led to the ability and the need for all these different spaces has led to a lot of interesting challenges. So we traditionally, companies had these media teams in play. Now we have increasingly with technology and technology infusing into marketing in a bigger way. Companies have MarTech teams in play. They have content teams because of the extent of content across social media channels and so forth, which is text, audio, video content that companies are generating. There are content teams existing in an organization. There are social media teams which are distinct and separate from them. There's performance marketing, and companies in general seem to be adding more and more capabilities, and many of them are in very siloed facilities. You've got performance marketing folks who are many times computer science people and statisticians who are being hired in the organization. You got your traditional brand marketing team that sort of exists to sort of tell the traditional story. These two people have no common language, no common conversation to even have between each other. They look at the world differently, they operate differently, and that's create this challenge of trying to manage them feels like this for many leaders in companies. If you talk to CMOs and CDOs and senior people like you in the organization, this is how they see the world, that we can't really manage these different functions because we are adding every new shiny object that exists. We now have a TikTok team, now we have something else, Clubhouse team, and so forth, that keeps adding on and creating this impression of the challenge that companies face. So and what is this observed tension that the MMA members sort of had? We had just 800 large corporations. So fundamentally, this tension was, I thought I knew my role. And this huge blurring. I thought I knew my job. I knew what my role was. And now with all these different functions coming in, it's not clear who does what, whether many of us do the same thing. There's this tremendous overlap. We have loads of data now, so what? I mean, data is not insight, data is not knowledge, data is not wisdom, data is data. What do we make of this data is sort of a big sort of challenge for a lot of these companies. Tech feels like eating strategy. Companies have all these new technologies that have come in that have introduced that we keep adding to our organizations. Feels like it's eating strategy. So it's tech for tech's sake without the idea of where we want to go. Which bell and which whistle do I have? I've got so many bells, I've got so many whistles. Which bell and which whistle is appropriate for my company, appropriate for what I'm delivering to my customers is unclear. Marketing is divided. I already talked about this. A performance marketing camp, there's a brand marketing camp, there's the traditional divide in B2B of marketing and sales that sort of existed. So all of these sort of camps there are more and more of these camps heading forward. The other big challenge the companies face, what should I do in-house in marketing? What should I do outsource in marketing? Traditionally, it was advertising, which was sort of outsourced. Now, increasingly, with all of this growth, what should I outsource? What should I insource? What should I keep inside the organization? How do I measure my investments in marketing? Your traditional trope of marketing payoffs being unclear. How do I even measure all of this? I have all this data, I have all these new capabilities that have come into play. Measurement is still a challenge. And the single biggest thing that we sort of constantly hear is that they keep adding more and more stuff and not dropping any of them or dropping very few of them. We are also diluting and fragmenting our resources across these different functions. And what gets measured gets managed. So suddenly we're throwing money into performance marketing. So it's really at the bottom of the funnel. The top of the funnel stuff is sort of still unclear as what we want to do. And the quality of leads coming down become increasingly poorer and poorer. So conversion and cost of acquisition keeps going up on the other side. So lots of challenges that they're not coordinating, they're not talking to each other, and so forth. I want to stop for a minute here and seeing if any of this resonates with you folks. So it's throw back to you. So.
Okay, I would take that as not as nobody's interested, as nobody has any questions at this moment.
Right. I'm just trying to see gut reaction does it resonate. I'm not seeing their faces and so forth on my screen, and which is I'm on a laptop, so I can't see them very well. And so I was just trying to find out if it resonates or not.
Hey, Sundar, can you elaborate a little bit on tech is eating strategy? I'm not sure I'm getting my head around that.
So the presumption here is that, a lot of emphasis with take performance marketing, for example. The presumption is that since you can track better, given that you have richer data, you can build these attributes, so-called attribution models much better with marketing models. You basically then drive your resources towards those kinds of things which I think are more measurable and those kind of technologies. And so a lot of resources have gone in that direction without a richer understanding of what your biggest strategy is in terms of, do we look at new customer acquisition? Do you sort of, convert existing customers? Do you get them to buy new products? What is your goal towards your growth? So that's not particularly clear to companies. So a lot of money has gone to the bottom of the funnel actions and very little that's coming into the top of the funnel, which means the money is being filtered from the top to the bottom. And if you're not filling at the top, then the bottom gets more and more, the quality of inputs that you're getting towards the bottom of the funnel are not necessarily always great. And if you see a lot of these companies, their customer acquisition costs are completely out of whack. And they're finding that it's probably because the quality of input that's coming in is not that great.
So they're using the tech because they can, not because they have a reason to.
Yeah, they have a reason to. They've hired these people with these capabilities who claim that they can show these kinds of models that sort of work. And which I'm not saying that these models shouldn't be used at all. So the question is that, what relative role do they play relative to other activities that the firm does? And that seems to be confusing to people. Not that we have the answers, but that's the tension that companies seem to be facing. And so given these observed tensions, we got called into do studies. So there are 3 or 4 of us now in the team that we did the study together. And we talked to a whole bunch of companies, companies which were doing better than average in their industries, companies that were below average in industries, companies about equal to the average. So it was really a sample that was representative of different levels of performance. The extent of companies that saw themselves as more legacy firms and companies that saw themselves as digital natives, and legacy firms, meaning I see them as digital immigrants. And so you can think of that. So we had a mix of both. We also had people at different executive levels. Some of them are CMOs, some of them were area experts. I use the word CMO loosely because I think there are many titles that fit in the word CMO. So the CMO title is an aggregate term that captures many different senior marketing execs in the organization and area experts within marketing. So we talked to a whole lot of them, got more than 120 interviews across 80 plus companies. And so from this, eventually we wrote this paper that was published in the December issue of the Harvard Business Review that Das was so kind enough to promote at the end of his talk. And so this is the paper that we wrote, which is your marketing ready for what's next? So in what I'm going to do today is I'm going to talk about, and in that paper we present just a framework. That's my front end of the study. I'm going to talk through the framework a little bit, and the back end of the study I'm going to talk about some empirical work that's kind of tied to this work that is more recent that I'll present as well. So the key, I think, of the framework is we start out by saying there are really 6 different ways in which marketing can add value to the firm. And that's really the marketing's value proposition. It's the value proposition not aimed at necessarily customers. It's the value proposition of the marketing function in the organization. And so it can do it in 6 ways. What you're seeing on the left-hand side is on the screen is the 3 ways that are customer facing. There are 3 ways which are firm facing. I'll briefly talk about the 3 ways in which the firms are facing, but the majority of the conversation today will be on the left-hand side, which is on the customer facing side. So fundamentally, the proposition is that you can create value for customers in 3 different ways. You can do it by I'll give it examples as well, by what's called exchange, which is creating unique offerings for customers based on the data that you have. You can identify and predict and target customer requirements. And based on those customer requirements that you predict, you're able to leverage the marketing mix, not just in terms of product, but also what communication you provide them, when you provide them, and how you provide them, and your pricing, which is also customized. So your ability to create offers and exchanges that are unique to customers' needs is at the transaction level. That's creating exchange value. You can also create value for customers by looking at the customer journey and looking at every aspect of the customer journey and figuring out how we can minimize hassles, pain points, so that the whole journey is enjoyable for the customer. And that creates opportunities for other business opportunities for you in the process and helps you with retention and growth of these sort of customers. The third approach that you can create customers is the more traditional approach in the B2C world, which is through engaging customers by building brands, by building communities of customers who in turn, provide, and B2B sort of does this quite well as well, and business services as well, the ability to sort of leverage customer groups or customer communities to capture ideas, to solve each other's problems, provide input on what you can do, create new product ideas and so forth. So managing the brand, managing the customer communities and so forth. So three distinct ways to think about creating value for customers, and companies may, as we said, may choose some combination of these as well. So think of engagement value. Engagement value, as I said before, is building the brand, creating a meaning, creating these communities. Salesforce, illustratively, is a good example where they have these bunch of customer communities that exist. They now have a CMO club as well that exists with a part of their communities they're leveraging, and they leverage their communities to sort of to enable Salesforce to improve the quality of the offering, to create new offerings, to build interactions among customers as well. And that's how they sort of leverage the brand with communities. An example of sort of experience value is you can think of many of your organizations have to look at the customer value in the B2B space. If you're traveling in a business travel or customer travel, if you travel a lot, I live in Atlanta, Delta is a great example for me. The app actually reaches out to me before I travel. If I'm traveling business class travel, they give me these choices of what meal to do and how to do it. The day I'm going to drive to the airport, they tell me about traffic on the roads, what time I need to leave. They give me information on waiting lines in the airport to sort of get in and get my check-in done. I can track my baggage. It also gives me information on where the lounges are, of coffee shops that I need in the airport. On flights, if I'm taking multiple connections, they track my baggage for me. Post-doc, when I land, they tell me where my baggage is, when it's going to arrive, and so forth. So through the app, they're trying to minimize many of the traditional challenges we as flyers sort of face on airlines and creating that whole experience to be painless. B2B companies, you've got FedEx and all these as examples of companies that also enable the same process all through the journey of tracking and providing information for customers to enable them to minimize their pain points and maximize the pleasure of the customer journey the customer has. That increases retention on the part of the customer. If you look at surveys of external studies of B2B companies, this is where it seems to be a lot of the B2B companies are very challenged at, that to digitally sort of help enable the customer to provide the experience through digital enablement. And many of these companies, customers are seeking these omni-channel, multi-channel omni-channel and sort of app-related tracking. Their phones have become the first screen on which firms, consumers interact with customers, and consumers interact with firms. And if that's the case, then really they're lacking behind. Customers do want the journey, so they want all the requirements definition, the customization, the deployment, and the post-deployment support. A lot of companies are very focused on just customizing and integrating the products. So the customers have very different orientation in this study that I was involved in earlier on customer solutions, sort of looks at distinction between how customers see it and how firms see it in the B2B space, and there's sort of big gap between what customers want and firms are delivering. And if you talk to B2B companies, their digital quotient is the lowest. Industrial organizations are the lowest among all organizations, the ability to deliver digitally. But clearly the experience journey is tied around that. Experience value creation is largely tied around that. So the third approach, as we said before, is exchange, which is creating unique offerings to customers and doing it based on the data that you sort of have. In the B2C world, you have a lot of these Stitch Fix type organizations which can curate and offer individual products to customers. Allstate does over 4,000, 5,000 different offers to customers on insurance. Then you have companies like CSE, which is now I think it's called DXC, Computer Sciences Corporation's new label is this, and they again use reverse lookups to sort of have unique offers to customers even in the B2B space. Right, and so that's the third approach to sort of do this. Think of it, and the way to think about this is sort of think about companies which will think of these as stacks, exchange, experience, and engagement as stacks. Companies vary in the relative importance of these sort of stacks, and it's very rare that we see a 3-stack company. Most companies are either some notion of they will, being an academic, can think of this as majoring in one and minoring in the other two, or majoring in two and minoring in the third, or majoring in one and minoring in the other, and so forth. So you've got these various combinations of companies that leverage this. And this is very important. simply because trying to do all three simultaneously is, in many cases, that companies try to do with this new digital environment, is diffusing resources. It really creates confusion as to where your strategy is tracking. The mission of marketing as a function is unclear when companies do this. And it's a nice parallel to education where when we join universities, we're taking these random classes. We hear from our friends about a good class, we take those classes. We hear about good professor, we go take those classes. Until we decide what our major is going to be, then your choices of courses become much clearer. And you're very diffuse, we're wasting our time and effort. Very similar to that, companies have to figure out where they want to create value. They want to create value through exchange or experience or engagement. What do they want to major in? What do they want to minor in? And that sort of seems to be a big step towards driving growth in organizations. So the other side of this creating value, which is firm facing, is companies can create value by creating strategic value. This is fundamentally helping custom companies to determine new revenue opportunities, new revenue streaming opportunities, new business models based on the data that's available to sort of companies. How do we create new revenue growth and new revenue opportunities and revenue models for companies? The other is this option of operating value. And I'll talk a little bit more about this in the sense of, as more and more of these functions and roles and marketing come into play, and what touches the customer is not necessarily only marketing, but every other function touches the customer. Logistics touches the customer, your billing customer touches the customer, as your legal touches the customers, every other function touches the customer as well. The importance of creating linkages and connections and alignment between these functions become critically important, and marketing can play a big role in orchestrating this whole process. That's the other way they can sort of create value. The third way they can create value internally is knowledge value. The richness of data, and many of these companies are literally becoming data generating machines. As they become data generating machines, those knowledge that they bring from these customers can enable them to be more precise, more targeted, and in every fashion, not just in the products and service offerings that they provide customers or the solutions that they offer customers, but also in how they interact and how they do throughout the journey across all of the functions, can create new knowledge that existed to create new offerings and so forth in the future. So literally marketing, many times we undersell the internal value created, and every time marketing is challenged in terms of its value creation, it's important to talk to really identify and discuss how many different ways it creates value internally to the firm as well. So let's talk a little bit about this idea of strategic value, the right side of this equation of this framework. You see large retailers right now, which sell B2B and B2C, Lowe's and Home Depot sell B2B, B2C, increasing their as just one illustration, an example, they're leveraging the retail stores to become basically advertising entities. As you know, as many of you have followed, we are entering into more and more closer to a cookie-free world, where GDPR, you generated it, subsequently privacy concerns have become paramount. And if you can't track the customer at the individual level, where do we reach the customer? Getting first-party data is becoming more and more critical on the customers. And many of these firms are saying, okay, the first-party data cannot come through cookies. How do we sort of reach them? And so in-store reaching is Lowe's, Home Depot, Target started it initially, but the other guys have now followed through. Walmart, where the retail stores become places where and Best Buy are examples where retail stores become places by which becomes a new revenue store for these customers and creating interaction. So it becomes new revenue streams, that revenue streaming that happens thanks to the fact that they have this information. And the key thing I talk about marketing is, I said, multiple functions touch the customer, and marketing in many cases may play a lead role in some of these activities, may play a supportive role in some of the activities, may play no role in other activities, but fundamentally marketing has the opportunity to sort of say, we will manage the coalition. No more is it functional departments, it's about managing coalitions of functions that touch the customer, and marketing can create value by creating mechanisms, by creating opportunities to figure out where it wants to play a role, and how it can leverage this partnership of companies. And later I'll talk about marketing's footprint as well and what it matters. But fundamentally, that's another way that we're seeing how marketers create value. The third is the knowledge value. There are companies have incredible amounts of sensors everywhere to collect data, lots of signals and systems in place, and that ability to touch the customer and get first-party data is growing dramatically for these companies. And marketing can play a lead role in generating the data that would be useful for the organization in many different ways. Ralph, during the break, talked about John Deere becoming a data company rather than a big hardware-driven company, and Caterpillar is no different right now. Increasingly, with the telematics and utilization, their ability to track utilization, conditions in which products are being utilized, that becomes an incredibly large revenue source for them in terms of streaming into a whole new business. GE has done this for a while. Pratt & Whitney with their aircraft engines have done it for a while. All of these become sort of revenue sources for companies. It also allows them to fully track, full feedback loop, close the loop, and figure out from marketing action to final response and post-response behaviors. All of these can be tracked and more so. And that's the knowledge valley idea. So fundamentally, and AI, and you can use AI to sort of create these machine learning models and NLP models to get insights. So really what we are looking at is 6 different ways in which marketing can create value. The marketing department's value proposition is 3 on the customer end, 3 on the firm end, and I'm going to start diving deep on the customer end in this sort of second part of this sort of talk. I'm going to stop again for a minute, take questions, comments, suggestions, insults. I'll take them all.
So we do have a request that you might slow down a bit.
Okay.
And there was a lot of curiosity around the example that you just showed where the cookies are going away and they're doing some other marketing. And I'm not sure if there was just more of like just interest about that, but I think that generally we all try to figure out how we can play a role in talking to the end user, right? And so I think I'll just reflect that there was a lot of interest there.
Yeah, I'm not going to come up with a solution and answer to the question. I think it's a great question, but it's still relatively early stages. This notion that we are going to a cookie-free world, and so there are ways around it. Google's not completely going away to cookie-free world. They are going to do cookie-free within some guardrails they claim. So it's not that it's going to be completely gone, but the importance of getting first-party data is becoming more and more critical for companies, and your ability to sort of circumvent partners and build offers, at least some sort of offers that you can have directly with the consumer, becomes important to get towards these first party data sources that you can think of. And many times it might be the service that you bundle around your product becomes your source of reaching out to customers to create your first party data. And that might be your way to sort of handle it. So it's not just setting a product may still have to go through partners and channel partners and so forth to reach end user consumers, but the service bundle that you do it to the extent possible that you can in-source it. And later I'll talk about customer experience, why it's important to in-source a lot of the customer experience activities. So the activities post-hoc after customer purchase, any experience the customer has with the product offering, if you can leverage through first party, through direct interactions, that's going to be your first party data to think about. And how you do it will vary by company. But that's where I think the opportunity arises for these companies.
Great.
Any other comments? Questions? I think there are like 7 items on chat, but they may be all from before.
I think we're good. I've been watching for you. Yeah.
Oh, cool. So great insight on the XXX, I think is one of the comments. And so going further is my second part of the study, which is not. Yeah. So the second part of the study is fundamentally about this notion of what are winning marketing organizations. So we have a method that we've been studying a lot of companies, publicly traded, some publicly traded firms. Many other firms don't disclose they're publicly traded or not. And so we have about 650 odd observations across US firms. They vary in size, they vary across sectors, so it's a fairly heterogeneous mix of organizations. And what we are looking at in these companies, we're looking at both in terms of their financial growth, so and customer growth. Financial growth meaning that growth in terms of delivering growth returns, in terms of financial growth as being delivering on both revenue and profit returns, at the satisfaction with the revenue and profit returns. And with customer again, delivering on customer retention, customer acquisition, and those kind of goals. So we're looking at that. We also have third-party data, which is, for publicly traded firms, we have revenue growth data, profit growth data, and share value data from these sort of firms. Based on that, we are contrasting 2 groups of companies. Companies which we call a winning marketing organization, that's a much smaller number, only 11% of them. They're literally the you can think of them as the top two box in a 7-point scale kind of idea. And then the bottom 3 box going into what we call as lagging marketing organizations. And about 22% of 21% of those companies are lagging marketing organizations. And from now onwards, we'll contrast these two groups. WMO stands for winning marketing organizations. LMO stands for lagging marketing organizations. The lagging marketing organizations are at the bottom of this kind of scale on financial and customer growth, and winning marketing organizations are on the top of these scales. And get you insights on org structure, on centralization, decentralization decisions, the role of marketing, the footprint of marketing the organization, insourcing and outsourcing, and lastly, we'll talk about capabilities and marketing capabilities in there. And so if you didn't have any time and you're going to walk away from now at this point in time, this slide is going to give you the big picture story of the rest of this talk. On the y-axis is the probability of being a winning marketing organization, and that goes from 0 to 100. Think of this sort of a logistic sort of model that sort of predicts the odds of you becoming a winning marketing organization. And then if you look at these 5 dimensions, which ones are the most critical in predicting the likelihood of a firm being a winning marketing organization, is one clearly is the marketing footprint. And the most critical of this list is the marketing capability fit, which I will define in a few minutes. The other factors, whether the structure of the organization, decisions of insource, outsource, centralization of decisions, seem to be less important, and some of them may be dysfunctional as well. And so that's the key takeaway. So if you think of 2 things that will decide whether you're going to be a winning marketing organization or not, it's basically the role that marketing plays in the organization, the footprint, and the second thing is your capability fit, right? So that's sort of a summary take on what it is. Let me dive deep on this. So let's start with structure. So invariably, if you talk to a lot of organizations that have trouble in this, the first thing they talk about is structure. Do we need to restructure? How do we sort of or decide who sits with whom? What do we locate? Where do we situate people in the organization? What structure happens? Our finding across this sample is that companies have very different structures. Some are purely product-based structures. Some are activity-based, which is expertise-based structures. Some of them are customer or segment-based structures. Some are customer outcomes focused on acquisition, retention, kind of outcome-based structures. Some are combinations of more matrix organizations, seem to have both or 2 or 3 different types. So lots of different types of structures exist in the marketplace as to how companies operate. What we do find is literally structure does not distinguish between winning and lagging marketing organizations. It's not the factor that drives the outcome. So companies could have any type of structure to be a winning marketing organization or a lagging marketing organization. So structure is not where that distinguishes. Structure is not where you should really start. If you're thinking about the digital environment, if you're thinking about changing your marketing organization, if you're trying to design your organization for the future, this is not where you'd start. We don't see a difference between structures. We don't see a difference between single and matrix structures. That's not what's a distinguishing factor between winning and lagging. Right? That's sort of the first big takeaway. The second takeaway is decision centralization. And in here we looked at 3 decisions that are either centralized or decentralized. One is if you look at this centralized, let's say around the CMO or chief marketing person, we have a situation when 3 things are all centralized, meaning the budget, how much money are we going to spend in marketing, all the budgetary decisions could be centralized. What product offerings and product decisions and where we're going to invest in the products and services that we're going to do, that could be centralized. The marketing programs that support a lot of these products and services in the marketplace, that could be centralized. So one, you can think of the budget as the money that we have. The other 2 is what do we do with the money, the implementation of the resources. And so you could be centralized on all 3. You could be centralized on some, decentralized on the other. Both options exist. At these completely decentralized structures, everything is sort of down to the field, wherever the different divisions are, the functions are, and the money goes to them. A centralized budget, everything sits with one central location, the organization. And what we find is that lagging marketing organizations, the organization at the bottom of this current poll, tend to centralize a lot more. They centralize a lot more across all functions. Winning marketing organizations centralize a lot less, right? That's the first big picture story. The second big picture story is that there's a little bit more nuance to the story. Both winning and lagging marketing organizations tend to centralize the budget decision. But the big distinction is that winning marketing organization decentralize what the money should be used for, and that's on the product and the program decisions. Winning marketing organizations decentralize a lot more than lagging marketing organizations who tend to centralize even program and product decisions, right? So the takeaway is that it's nuanced. So it appears to be winning and lagging marketing organizations both seem to centralize the budget. So centralizing budget seems to help, but decentralizing the program and the product decisions seem to be important. So really, if we're making the decision between centralization and decentralization, it depends, and it depends on what you're decentralizing for. Let me stop here. I've hit 2 issues here. Again, any questions, clarifications, comments?
I think it's fascinating that you find that there are things that make no difference, and yet they seem to be maybe the most often thing that we want to try to change. Do you have a sense of why that is, that we try to change things that don't matter?
Yeah, so it'd be a bit speculative, I think, but my sense of talking to lots of companies about this is fundamentally there seems to be a bias for action. Moving people around and doing this seem to be something that's tangible, visible, that you can sort of take action on. And it's relatively quicker than saying I want to build new capabilities in the organization, right? Capabilities are very different from competencies. Competencies are individual specific. Capabilities are tied to not just the individuals, not people, but also the processes and the routines and the technologies that you utilize within the firm. And so capabilities are a lot more complex and they stay in the firm, but takes a longer period of time. It's much more challenging to build, and you don't know if you're doing the right things. So those things that are much harder and much more longer term to do. Restructuring and changing structure seems to be quicker and faster. And so that bias for action seems to be driving this process. That's my sense for why that happens.
Thank you.
Yeah, I don't know if it makes sense. And other people, any thoughts on this? And
give it a second.
Yeah.
I agree with you that I feel like it's sometimes if it's the thing that's within your control, whether it actually does anything, it's the thing that you try to do.
Absolutely. And it's visible, it's right there for you, so it becomes easier to do. I'm happy with pregnant pauses, so I can wait and get. I know technology makes it much more challenging than face to face.
Yes, that's true.
Well, okay.
Right.
So either people are totally disinterested or they're completely interested and they get it. All right. I hope it's a latter, and I'll continue. The third is roles and responsibility, what marketing activities, who should do what, and so forth, and what's required to sort of distinguish between winning and lagging marketing organizations. What we do find is that winning marketing organizations have a larger marketing footprint on average than a lagging marketing organization. So if you look at the number of activities which are drivers of growth on the x-axis and across the total sample, winning marketing organizations have a bigger, much bigger footprint. And you can see as more of these growth activities are picked up by marketing, and we'll draw a distinction between growth and not growth soon enough. But if you look at more and more of these growth activities sort of owned by marketing or play a lead role by marketing, they're more likely to be a winning marketing organization. This is hopefully not self-serving for marketers. We'll find some and draw a little bit distinction. So we go back and look at the 3 types of value, which is engagement, exchange, and experience. What you find is that marketers in general tend to lead more of the engagement activities, storytelling, media, advertising, promotions, and those kinds of activities. They seem to be playing lesser role in performance marketing. Many times digital functions do it in the organization. They do less on pricing, they less do on sales, clearly sales separate, and then you have the experience activities, customer journey, which many cases goes to a UX or UX type of group or a CX type of group in the organization, and service being separate. They seem to be playing lesser and lesser of a marketing footprint on exchange and experience activities. What this sort of entails is also very interesting. If you go predict the winning marketing organization probability, it's the exchange and the experience activities which are bigger predictors of being a winning marketing organization. The engagement activities are less predictive of being a winning marketing organization. So in some sense, it appears that marketing is playing a more important role in less important activities and playing a less important role in more important activities that drive winning probability. This is very sobering. So if you look at this and look at this. So fundamentally, if you take this further into this area of capabilities, if you look at across the blue line, being organizations that look across these three different activities, both winning and lagging marketing organizations do about equal level of engagement, but winning marketing organizations are more involved in exchange and experience activities as compared to the average, and significantly more involved in exchange and experience activities than lagging marketing organizations. If you look at what we call as new and foundational being product, price, promotion, those kinds of things, and new being the ability to deliver convenience, deliver digital experience, and so forth. Again, what you find is that it's the foundational activities again are distinct between winning and lagging marketing organizations, and the digital activities seem to be done by both, but winning marketing organizations do a lot more. And the biggest distinction is activities that are commercial, which convert into cash flows and action, sales or key account management and so forth, are commercial activities. If you look at that distinction, winning marketing organizations, lagging marketing organizations do similar amount of branding, but winning marketing organizations are more involved in commercial activities. Lagging marketing organizations are a lot less involved. So they're very brand engagement centric, not experience and exchange centric. Right. So the fire, fundamentally adding more fuel to that fire, that a lot of lagging marketing organizations are doing activities that seem to be are not unimportant, but less important to the firm, whereas winning marketing organizations are doing activities that seem to be more important to the organization. So again, any quick reactions, thoughts here?
No, it sounds like we need to start doing some very different things in commerce.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, the takeaway is this, it's a question that, do you want to take more ownership of the customer journey? Do you want to take ownership of designing offers and so forth? That activity needs to be more that marketing sort of plays a role, and the more it plays a role, the more the likelihood of success. And so clearly the footprint matters. It's not just in terms of total involvement, but more involvement in experience activities. Exchange is sort of relatively stable, but what companies need to think about is, do they need to be as involved in engagement activities, right? So which leads to this in-source, outsource question. What do we do in-house? What do we do sort of with external partners? What we do find is that size of the firm, mid-sized firms tend to generally outsource more. Smaller and large firms tend to outsource less. Smaller firms don't have many things to outsource. Large firms tend to sort of looks like they get more in-sourced. If you look at the nature of activities, there's a whole bunch of marketing activities that we have listed on the right side of this chart. And so you find out it's traditionally the what's least outsourced is customer engagement, key account management, sales kind of activities are the least outsourced. The most outsourced are advertising, media management, and those kinds of activities tend to be the PR and so forth seems to be the most outsourced activities in organizations. If you dive deep into the distinction between winning and lagging marketing organizations, what you find is that outsourcing of engagement activities where you leverage the external ecosystem of capabilities leads to greater winning probability. And the activity that you don't want to outsource is basically the experience activity of the organization. The more you outsource the experience activities, the lower the likelihood that you'll be a winning marketing organizations. So that customer experience across the customer journey needs to be a lot more in-sourced than outsourced. And basically, it's just that that's something that you don't want to rely on your partners or any external ecosystem to do it, but do it yourself. Exchange seems to be relatively stable in some sense, but the big draw and distinction is outsource engagement and in-source experience. Again, this is consistent with the earlier point of where do we want to play a role. If you outsource engagement a lot more, that frees up resources to perhaps utilize towards your experience activities. And that might be the way for companies to start thinking. So engagement benefits most from an external system. Keep close control of the customer experience. Outsource with great caution. Different outsourcing works as far as exchange is concerned. The last bit is capabilities. This I said before was the most important driver of winning marketing organization. And what we mean by capabilities here is a whole bunch of activities. And what we find is winning marketing organizations tend to do a lot more of technology, data and demand with customer insights and creativity. And lagging marketing organizations tend to do a lot less of those than winning marketing organizations. Let me get this a little bit richer and get towards this notion of fit. What we mean by fit is, understanding a set of growth-related capabilities that companies have. In our framework, if you look across the 6 areas, we can break them up into 18 broad categories. Underlying 18 broad categories are 72 distinct capabilities that exist. Sort of a very comprehensive list of capabilities from a lot of our research that comes into play. So start with a list of capabilities, growth capabilities that exist. Figure out which ones of them drive your growth over the next 2 to 3 years. We're not looking at some long-term window where whole world changes and the world may not even exist, but just the next 2 to 3 year period of time to drive your growth. And then look at your performance, meaning that what are these activities being done by whom and what and so forth. And the plot between the two, measure the average difference between the two, and that will tell you your fit. So if you're on that line, on the 45-degree line in the middle, then there's greater fit. So you're focusing on the activities that matter for your future growth pattern. So what we find on average, the average capability is around 68-69% for the sample, but winning marketing organizations are 81%. So really they are pretty much on the line there. Their capabilities that they have in the organization is very consistent with their growth drivers, need for growth drivers. Lagging marketing organizations, on the other hand, much further away, much lower levels of fit. It's 56%, which means that a lot of the activities they're doing are perhaps not relevant for their fit, or they're not doing the activities that are important for them. So you've got both sides. They're all doing activities that are less relevant, and they're not doing activities that are relevant. So that fit level is significantly lower for lagging marketing organizations. What does that mean in terms of outcomes? So if we go look at the growth satisfaction outcomes, what we find is that there seems to be a pretty strong connection between winning and lagging marketing organizations. Companies which are greater on fit, which is winning marketing organizations, get literally 3x the growth satisfaction that lagging marketing organizations have. And you can it's quite dramatic in terms of 3x being very large in terms of growth. If you take the subsample of publicly traded firms and link it back to reported publicly traded outcomes, the growth rate of winning greater fit or winning marketing organizations, even during the pandemic year, was between 11 and 12%. The lagging marketing organizations were between 3 and 4%. That gap is, after controlling for many other traditional drivers of sales growth, what you find is the gap is between, it's about 2.5x. If the greater the fit, the growth rate is about 2.5x in terms of real data, in terms of sales growth. We also connected to market valuation, which is the financial market value of the firm. And here what we find is a 1% increase in marketing capability fit is related to a 2.35% increase in market value of the firm. Again, it's a regression that we control for many other factors. And we find that, that it's not just with growth rate, but also in stock market value of the firm. Fit is a big predictor or driver of market value of organizations. And so, summarize again, the key drivers are fit and the marketing footprint, what role that marketing plays. The other structure seems to be less important. So if you go back and think of redesigning your organization, flip the equation. Don't start with structure and changes around structures and competencies of your people. Start at the bottom. What's your mission? How do you want to create value? Do you want to create value through exchange or through experience or through engagement? Which of the three stacks are we going to be majoring 2 stacks and minoring one, or majoring one and minoring the other? Figure out what the mission and how you're going to create value for the customer. That's going to then decide what capabilities you're going to require in your organization. And it's from there that you go to the next stage of deciding which ones do we keep in-house and externally. What's the structure of the organization? What skills and competencies do our employees need to deal? I talk to a lot of companies, and the first thing they come back and tell you it's about structure. The next thing they talk about building an academy to build the competencies of people. All our research seems to indicate start with your mission or what the mission of marketing is going to be, then talk to the capabilities, and then drive towards the skills that you want to sort of drive. And that's sort of the big summary takeaway from this study, right? Again, any of you interested, we have a marketing capability institute. It's just purely practitioners and academics getting together who are interested in marketing capabilities in specific. So it's marketingcapabilities.com. Take a look at this. It's just started, and it may be a place where I think you could learn about marketing capabilities research. Again, capabilities is not individual competencies, but processes and routines and technology and individual competencies put together. And a lot of research insights are being shared in here, and conversations with people as well is going to start here. And that's pretty much my conversation. I'm open for questions and comments and thoughts here.
So we have one question that came in. Are the disparities between the winning and the laggard marketing organizations partly due to an inability to measure financial returns, particularly in the experience activities where it might be challenging?
We actually didn't find the issue of measurement to be sort of a big challenge. The measurement is important, but it's not the key one. It's just the fact that they are less involved in those activities than other situations. And clearly having data, I mean, the point that if you have the data around it, it's going to help you get better within the experience activities. Data becomes more critical if you're going to go the exchange route and less so the experience route.
Okay, thank you. Gonna let other people, if they want to, they can just talk.
I'll actually stop sharing and unless somebody wants to see a share, I'll stop sharing and get towards the looking at people's faces.
Yeah, if anybody would like to, they can just unmute and ask a question. Break. We are getting close to the noon hour. So as well, Liam, go ahead.
Hello, Sundar, nice to see you again.
Hey, Liam, good to see you. Yeah.
If I take your presentation at face value, which I do, what I think you're really saying is that the notion of marketing as a function is as dead as a doornail.
I did not want to say that, but I think marketing is spending time on activities that perhaps they should reconsider, reallocate their focus, and perhaps change. That the world has changed and the requirements of customers have changed and needs have changed. I think it's where you focus. I think is needs to change. Yeah, and I'll let you take that summary shot. But I think you're right. I think it's directionally correct.
But there may be a difference between directionally correct and making the statement that it's dead.
Yeah.
Because everything you've said is
you're
about
right.
marketing, building a coalition of entities within the organization, building capabilities which are not marketing specific per se.
Right.
And therefore, as a function, you need the integration interaction with all the other parts of the organization to achieve the intent of marketing that you so richly describe.
Right. No, you're exactly right. But the other angle to see this is marketing can be the leader of the coalition.
Yeah.
So think of this as coalition and orchestrating the coalition. The fact that they do interface with the customers gives them an opportunity to do that.
Yeah.
And be clearly aware, where you have to lead, where you have to support, and where you have to get out of the way. Right? Be clear about that, and that's where part of the coalition leading comes into importance. But we do find that if marketing gets more involved in experience and exchange, the greater the likelihood of success.
But marketing itself does not have control as a function of building those capabilities.
Yeah. So part of it is, I think marketing is historically in a different conversation, but that internal value creation of marketing, we talked about 3 mechanisms by you can create internal value, strategic knowledge, and operational value, is not well communicated in the organization is what marketing can do. And it's the ability of marketing to go on, and there are clearly a list of 36 capabilities that reside around it, at least in our framework, and that HBR talks about it. The framework that lies on the other side plays a big part in communicating how they can create that value. And Das's point today about several things that he talked about, the company needs to go from the left side of the chart to the right side of the chart to be more customer profitably oriented rather than product profitably oriented. I think a lot of it resides both in terms of deciding these three dimensions of value, whether you want to be exchange, whether you want to be experience, whether you want to do engagement, you want to be a three-stack company. A lot of it will inform that decision as you go from product towards customer profitability, choices that you're making there as a mission of marketing. On the other side, the transition from the bottom to the top in terms of tracking information and looking at what customers sort of does from the bottom to the top on the chart will be informed by the three other opportunities that we see here on creating internal value. The strategic value, especially the knowledge and the strategic value, are hugely important as you move from lower to right. Again, this 2x2 is very heavily informed by the structure, the choice you make here.
Anyone else? All right, as always, if you think of something later, please feel free to reach out to us and send us a note to us directly or to Sundar, and we'll be happy to get back with you. We're now at the lunch hour break. We're going to give you 30 minutes.